Hello and welcome to Pale Reflections, a proud member of the Duff Network where we reflect on Wildbow's most scholastic work as it releases. I'm Ruben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And wait, Elliot, before we get into the episode, a reminder, fan art contest is going on right now. The theme is
Yep,
The Power of the Holidays, so get in your entries by the 4th of January.
exactly.
Now let's get on with the show. We are talking about Gone Ahead 7.2, Gone Ahead 7.3, and the bonus material, which was a Borrowed Eyes comic this week.
Mhm.
Let's dive into 7.2 with Lucy. They're back on campus. Lucy and the gang are stalking around looking for a weakness or a way in that they can exploit. And I guess just on a note of, we did our reflecting episode on Arc 6 and our guest Sesh, great episode, check it out. Our guest Sesh was talking about how she noticed that Avery is a vegetarian, just like a deer. And immediately we see Lucy pulling out night vision, which is something that foxes are notoriously good at, right? So I just thought this was a funny parallel between Lucy and a fox.
Yeah, although what's interesting about it is like Lucy has modified her mask to make it a thing. Like she
Mm,
added those night vision runes back in Arc 1, I think.
yeah.
Um but it's something she's kind of having to force. Like it's in the mask, she only gets it with the mask. Whereas Verona's sight is like free dark vision.
Yeah, it's an interesting note, isn't it? I wonder what it means. Potentially Lucy is keeping her practice a bit more at arm's length is the interpretation, I
Mm.
guess. So it's not as natively leaning into it, you know?
Yeah, yeah, a bit like how, like I read a lot into the symbolism of her only having one earring, like
Mm,
being very much the same. Because if it was like both ears, she's sort of all into the practice. Whereas like
yeah.
with the one earring, it's like she's got one ear on this other stuff. She's gonna keep her ear out, but it's
Yeah.
not everything.
She's got a foot in both worlds very explicitly.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I like that interpretation.
Mm,
I really like though the glowing eyes. Like she talks about how she made them glow red to give them the night vision, and that's just
mm.
fucking well, it's just badass.
Yeah, it's definitely a good way of her representing, that she's got a bit of bite.
Yeah, well, exactly. Like red is, I dare I say they've got a carmine glow to them.
Hmm.
These
Interesting.
eyes. I don't know, and like because again, she's a fox. Foxes are canines or they're close, and the carmine beast was canine-ish, so she's channeling her inner carmine beast, I suppose.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, channeling the Carmine Beast vibe. So immediately at the start of this chapter, Lucy mentions how there are students patrolling around the BHI, and she kind of hits the word patrol very intentionally. And this just kind of stood out to me of like, it's really, they decided to do a rebellion, and it's really immediately gone into, we're at a war here, right? Like they're basically they feel like they're a hit squad creeping around the school, which is crazy to me. Um, yeah, I don't know. And there's like students patrolling around for like insurgents. Like it's really turned into a guerrilla warfare vibe very quickly.
Y-
Interestingly, as well, Bristow has a bunch of augurs on his team, so I was kind of a little bit like, why are you guys sneaking around? They probably are gonna just get you.
Well, I suppose that's where the nettle wisp comes in.
Yes,
Um,
true.
but yeah, no, I agree. Like this chapter makes it so apparent how quickly this place has gone from zero to police state.
Mm,
Um, yeah, and you're right. Like I was like, this is only the start of the second chapter, and we're already in fucking like the stealth level of a video game, doing guerrilla like warfare tactics. Like yeah. I think this introduction to this chapter really sort of sets the tone of like, yeah, this place has gone to the shit now. Like there's students out fucking patrolling at night. Um, and outside of Hogwarts, I think that's usually seen as something that's like a place is bad.
yeah. Yeah. Um, Actually, here's something else I want to touch on. The vibe when the trios are suiting up, um, I find really fun. Like we've been talking about how the masks are a bit dweeby, but the when they put on their masks, it has this vibe of like they're pulling on balaclavas for some mischief. It's really fun.
Yeah, well, they glamour paint them black for this as well, which I think adds to that effect. Like they're sort of pulling on the masks to like as you said, it's like putting on balaclavas. They're entering like stealth mode. It's not like three girls putting on their witch's hat and their colorful animal masks to go into battle, which I love, but it's such a dorky image. This is
Mm,
like serious mode.
mm, yeah. They're going into serious vibes, painting their masks black. It is still a bit dorky, but I think I just think it's fun.
I completely agree. Um, Also, there's a little moment where Lucy takes note of the fact that as they're painting their masks and using like glamour, Toadslow and Gashwad don't comment on it.
Mm,
Which just jumped out to me because even later in this chapter and in the next one, the goblins are always sort of like, "Oh, don't use fairy bullshit. It's fake bullshit."
mm,
Um, but it's like here, I think I read this as like even the goblins are like this shit serious enough that they're even
yeah.
gonna like let that slide.
Putting that stuff aside temporarily.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, here's a okay. The start of this chapter is so jam-packed full of stuff. God. Um Another thing that happens at the very start of this chapter that I thought was very interesting was Lucy's looking at Verona and seeing how in her element she is with Tasha and stuff. And
Yeah,
is thinking about how can she stop Verona from just being fully into this world and losing her human side. And then Lucy immediately transitions to asking Avery if she thinks that Verona and Jeremy are going to end up together. Like it's such an immediate jarring um, transition that I'm like, well, what's going on? And it sounds like Lucy is trying to kind of think about whether she can, I guess, bait Verona back to humanity with romance with Jeremy, right? Like that's the vibe. Like, what's the one thing that might pull Verona back to being a human? Oh, dating Jeremy. What? How can I see if that can happen?
yeah. No, like that was definitely my read. Is because you're right. She goes from thinking, "How do I stop Verona like slipping into this world?"
Mm,
um, when it's sort of so enticing for Verona.
mm.
And then I think there's this thought that we're missing, which is her thinking, well, what are the things that tie Verona to the mundane world? Like, what is Verona like in the mundane world? And the only thing that's sort of on that list is Jeremy question mark.
Yeah. Yeah. It's weird, isn't it? It's a weird vibe that's the thing that she goes for. It does feel a little bit insidious, I would say.
I mean, it depends on what you think her motivations for bringing it up are. When you read it as just like, what are the things Verona cares about in the mundane world that I could, help her to see the importance of? Or is it like,
Mm,
oh, I need to set them up so that she can't fall in? Like,
mm.
depends on exactly how she's sort of thinking about it. I chose to read it as the more wholesome, just like, oh, should I nudge her in this direction so she doesn't forget what humanity has to offer?
Yeah, true. I guess it can be read in multiple ways. The fact that we're in Lucy's head means that she's not like wrapping it in the justifications that she would do if it was something she was actively going to take. It's just kind of a idle thought more than anything too insidious, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. But I love this bit where she obviously starts this thought with sort of thinking about how Verona seems actually happier and more chill in this war between practitioners than she does at home. Like I think Lucy and
Mm,
Avery are having a bit of a meltdown, and like Verona, like Lucy notes, Verona is happier here than she has been like ever.
mm,
Um,
yeah.
and I mean, like, I think we talked about this the start of Arc 3 as well. It was like when Avery went missing and was like stuck in the paths, and Lucy sort of commented on how calm Verona was. And I think we sort of talked about that. We were like, well, yeah, this is when you want someone like Verona in your corner, like when the shit hits the fan and someone can sort of still have their wits about them.
Mm,
And I guess that's just Verona here. Like for Verona, this magic stuff is cool, and the war is like weirdly the war is stressful enough that she probably doesn't have to think about her dad, which is like a net positive for Verona. It's like she'd rather be stressing about this war than her dad. Um, so it's like made her happier, and like that's like kind of scary good in the Alexander way of like she's going to be very efficient still.
mm. Yeah. Yeah. It's good. I mean, yeah, it's good that Verona's able to operate in her in her element in this way. It's still. I guess we're not as worried. I'm definitely not as worried about Verena as I used to be, but I don't know. It's still just a little bit of like, is she too at ease with all this stuff?
Yeah. I mean, is it a bad thing if she is?
Mm,
I think that's an argument you could make. Like if the world probably needs people who aren't trying to cause these situations but can handle them when they come up.
mm,
Like the not trying to cause them thing is how I'm separating Alexander out of this because he doesn't do enough to stop it.
yeah. Well, yeah, I guess. Um, yeah, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff in this. Like we're like 10 paragraphs in, and um, there's a lot of stuff that we've had to stop to talk about, which is good. I
Yeah.
mean, this is why Lucy's my favorite because there's always so much stuff going on when Lucy's your point of view.
Yeah. Well, I mean, wait till we get to talking about her earring in this chapter and the next chapter as well. It's so cool seeing it in action.
Mm. Um, so, speaking of earring being used to overhear things, we overhear something very interesting in this conversation, which is that Toad Swallow has a girlfriend, which is great. I mean, she's off being a familiar to somebody right now, and I'm desperately thinking, do we have any female goblin familiars that this could be? But yeah, man, that was fun. That was very fun.
Uh, yeah, I mean, look, I've done a long distance relationship. It's hard to swallow. I get it.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, this is fun to think about. Just like the concept of goblin relationships is kind of inherently frightening, isn't it?
Um, I guess. Look, there's an entire series of works dedicated to that idea, and it's called shit. What is it called? It's not called Pram, is it? That was our stupid joke for. Oh,
No,
Poke.
are you
That's
talking
right.
about Poke?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I rest my case.
go read Poke if you want more about what it looks like when Walbo writes what does the goblin romance look like. It's awesome. But yeah, I'm
Although, also be cautious. Poke does have packed spoilers in it in some spots.
yes, it does. That's a good point. So careful for that. But
Just read
definitely.
packed first, like
Well,
problem solved.
the spoilers aren't. Don't hold me to this because I'm thinking of this off the top of my head. But the spoilers aren't hugely major, if I recall. But there are some in there for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I suppose it depends how serious you are about spoilers, but there's
Yeah,
some stuff in there about like the ending of Pact.
yeah. Cool.
Anyway, sorry.
Anyway, good. It's fun. I just want more goblin romance, basically. So the fact that we get a hint at it in this chapter is awesome.
Yeah, technically, Toadswallow doesn't say that it's a goblin he's interested in. He just says she's a familiar.
True, true. I assumed it's a goblin, but what if it's a fairy and it's a real Romeo and Juliet type of deal? That would be
Or
fun.
what if it's a practitioner who got a familiar? A
Wait,
goblin?
what? Does that work?
I don't know.
Hmm.
Do
Okay.
we know? Wait, is the way it's phrased? Does it have to be the other?
Right. I didn't even think of that. Shit. Now I've got to pull it up now, Elliot, because that's such a good theory. All right, hold on. I'm gonna search familiar. No, it says she's a familiar right now. So it is. I mean, there are relationships where the practitioner can kind of be the familiar, so it's not fully out, but I think it probably deconfirms it.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not ideal phrasing, but I like you could, this is a world where you wriggle around technicalities like that. And I'm saying, like, I don't. Do we know that you can't call the practitioner the familiar? Like,
Mm.
what do you call the practitioner in a practitioner familiar relationship? Like,
I mean, I think the word is master, but that's a very practitioner focused word, so
yeah,
maybe it's
exactly.
yeah.
Anyway, sorry, this is just a stupid joke. Wait, we've been on this for too long.
But I love it. I love it. Um, okay, so yeah, let's keep going, shall we?
Um, yeah. Oh, actually, sorry. No, changed my mind. One last thing about Toad Swallow before we move on. Um, is it just me, or is he getting more like openly crude around the Cannoteers? Like he just sort of starts making bestiality jokes here.
Mm,
And they're funny, but he had his whole thing right, both specifically about the Cannoteers and about kids in general, where he has to be like sanitized around them.
mm.
And I'm wondering if like is this weird sign of respect if Toad Slow starts to be more crude because it's like him like acknowledging that they're growing up. Am I
Mm.
reading too much into this? But
No, I can see it. I can see it. I mean, yeah, I guess it's hard to know for sure because Toad Swallow's thing isn't like a magical rule. It's just something that he's agreed to and imposes on himself, right? So we've seen him not swear, and so it's not. I don't know. It's like, yeah, I wonder. I don't know. Yeah,
I
I can see
choose to
it.
read that because
Let's headcanon it. Yeah.
yeah, I think it's weirdly wholesome that Toad Slow will start making bestiality jokes because he respects them and thinks that they're growing up.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Good headcanon. Um, so the group, this hit squad comes across the dueling field, right? And on the dueling field, there's a structure that Bristow is starting to set up, and they decide to mess with it. Basically, just cause a ruckus. It's guerrilla warfare, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I really like the vibe the team has here, and also a bit in the next chapter. Like, the way everyone's just communicating and catching up. Like they're sort of hatching their Ocean's 11 heist on the fly, which is an idea. But it's
Mm,
just cool seeing everyone coordinate. Like especially like other and practitioner.
yeah.
Like genuinely side by side and on the same playing field. It's really cool to see.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of for example, the others giving like tricks and tools to the Kenneteers in order to help them operate, and we see a bit of it going the other way here, which is really nice. It's just like they're just a cool team.
Yeah, like Avery lends Toad Swallow the rope. Whereas like on the other side, the people they're fighting, it's just a group of humans. They don't even summon anything. I don't think
Mm,
they use tools and yelling real loud as
yeah,
their weapons.
yep. Um, yeah, it's interesting. In this group is Kevin, the evil eye Kevin, and his girlfriend, who again keeps getting mentioned, and is like, we still don't know what she can do. Every time it comes
Mm.
up, everyone's like, we don't know, whatever. But it's so obviously something's going on with her, and I'm so curious to find out what it is.
Yeah, well, there was that like whole big conversation the Kenneteers had with Yadira and Raquel where they tried to kind of
Yeah,
logic it out and they
yeah.
got maybe close. We don't know. Um, yeah, this feels like a bit of a Chekhov's gun. Like whenever she's going to finally activate. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think of like what's the partner for Strife. If Kevin emanates Strife, what pairs with that? Literally,
Mm,
I don't know.
yeah, I also don't know the answer to that one.
All All I know for sure is that her and Kevin are talking about having kids, and I don't like that idea. I'm very
Yeah,
sure about that.
their relationship is very
Odd.
seemingly affectionate. Which I didn't expect from Kevin, who is seemingly the most evil in universe character we've had so far, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I got kind of controlling-ish vibes from him, but
True.
maybe I'd have to go and reread it. Honestly, I could have just been
Yeah.
injecting my hatred for Kevin into that. I don't
Mm. No, I think it's probably fair to. I mean, I don't think anyone's gonna, volunteer to defend Kevin. He's quite
know.
clearly a piece of shit. Probably the biggest piece of shit in the story, right?
He's got to be up there, just
Yeah.
because, especially because he's just someone who, like, got this magical power just from hating everyone so
I
much.
know, right? Yikes. Um, but actually, now that I think about it, all the biggest pieces of shit in the story are Bristow's team, right?
Yep.
Like Sharon, Shelley, Kevin. So,
Bristow.
I mean, yes, Bristow as well. Although, yeah, yeah.
Oh, and Mr. Figueroa, the guy who gets rewarded by karma for being a jackass.
Oh yeah, the guy who gets rewarded by karma when he takes up two parking spots. Oh man, this story has so many wild things in it. I love it.
um, yeah. And so speaking of, we like we get this little moment where Gash sort of gets told to go fuck up the field and like stop it from working. And Toad Swallow's like, oh, you got to go do this. This is your moment to shine. And Gashwad's like real upset because he thought he was here to fight. And like this jumped out to me because one of the things I remember about Gashwad, like way back from Arc 2 when Verona was interviewing them, I think, um, is that like Gashwad was like really against his label of not being like a fighter. I think the label he was being given at the time as a goblin was like a scrapper. And
Mm,
he was like he wanted to be a scrapper, and they're like, no, you're a something other that
mm,
is better at tricks. And he's like, no, I just want to be a fighter. And they're like, oh, he's
mm,
so wasted. And it was like, I don't know, with all the Oni talk from last chapter, like that feels significant that Gashwad, the one who hates the labels and the jobs he's being given, is the one who has come into the fore.
mm, mm. I think, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, obviously, we're talking about the idea of the Kennet others and the idea that they all defy labels to an extent, right?
Yeah, or they want. I like. I can't remember where I saw this phrasing, but there's someone who was like they're placing more emphasis on their own individuality than their labels, which I like.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good way to phrase it for sure. Uh, it's interesting though, the label of whatever he was that's not a scrapper. Like, who is ascribing that label to him other than Toad Swallow and the other people in Kennet, right? If
Yeah.
they're people that are going to try and break these labels, they also have to stop being the ones that are reinforcing them.
Although to be fair, that was I think the context of that was like Blunt Munch, like telling her about these goblin labels, which we later
Right.
learned were intentionally bullshit.
Yeah,
Um,
true.
so it's a little bit fairer, but I guess yeah, like I at a high level, it's sort of like Gashwad seems to be getting pushed in one direction by the universe, and he's trying to move in another one.
Mm,
And like jumping ahead in this a bit, I always sort of had Gashwad written off as like the goblin I thought the least about. Like he was like the fourth, the extra one. Like
yeah.
just Cherry Pop was imprinted in our minds.
Cherry
Toadslow
Pop's number
was,
one, of course.
yeah, and then Blunt Munch was like in the background a bit, but he was like he was defined by being the big one, the one who could boss other goblins around. And then Gashford was just like, yeah, he fights sometimes, I guess.
Mm,
So it's cool seeing him actually like, yeah, I guess as the original Kennet other that I felt like I cared about the least or knew the least about, he's actually sort of getting some space here, and he wins me over in this chapter.
mm. Yeah, he does pretty well. He's he does all kinds of things this chapter. It's great.
Yeah.
We'll get to them in a bit, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, and actually, and we learned from Totoro that America and Liberty, they don't come from like a family that specifically specializes in goblins. Their father
Yes.
apparently does some stuff around that, and he hired Totoro to teach them. And being the overachieving businessman that he is, Totoro completely converted them to being goblin princesses.
Oh, it's pretty great.
I think it makes the names even funnier as well. Like I had kind of written like America and Liberty as names for goblin princesses offers like a bit of a like, attack on rednecks.
Mm,
Um but it's kind of funny, like you can imagine if their dad like did all this other stuff including that, like maybe he's some sort of like city mage or
yes.
whatever, and like,
Yes.
building some sort of big society based on and like pulling from the imagery of the
Yeah.
US and
Like a
and
patriotism wizard in some way,
yeah,
right?
and like goblins were meant to be like a small part of that, and they've just been completely corrupted.
Well, yeah, because not to get too political, but it's kind of what patriotism is, huh?
I mean,
Of course, they
I'm not
didn't.
disagreeing.
Nobody is called America and sets out to become a goblin practitioner, but invariably, that's where it ends up, right?
Yeah, yeah, I love
Mm,
that. Um,
yeah, I think it's great.
Also, we'll obviously get into how visually great this series is when we get to the extra material. But I love how Lucy, her sight, like interprets Kevin's evil eye as like he throws like this shade beam on everything, and Musa is here and it like just drips off him, so he's got some sort of protection. Like it's so cool how we can visualize something like this like that.
Mm, yeah, it's yeah, it is cool, and I think it's funny that as soon as Lucy kind of clicks that it's Musa, she starts noticing these mannerisms that are all just really smarmy and shitty.
Yeah, he's someone I hope we get to dive into as an antagonist for a bit because he's kind of fascinating. Like one of the biggest strengths of the Kenneteers and the Kennet others, I think, is their versatility.
Mm,
And if Mus is someone who's gone around the world collecting familiars and implements, he might be someone who can kind of match that.
mm.
Or maybe not. Is there a theme to his implements and familiars? Like, are all his familiars, I don't know,
Fairy or
others with
whatever.
red
Yeah.
noses, Like,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know.
yeah. Yeah, interesting. No, I do think that it would most likely be more along the lines of versatility. Like, I have an implement that lets me deal with augurs. I have an implement that lets me deal with chronomancers. I have an implement that lets me deal with technomancers, right?
Yeah, although I don't know. I feel like there'd have to be some theme to connect them, but it's like, if you sort of identify that theme, then you can branch off of it to do what you're talking about, right? Like, so, like, if the theme was all of my implements have to be like, I don't know, handheld objects or something. That's a very broad thing, but in fact, I think that just might be a requirement for implements in general. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Mm, mm. Yeah, true. Um, oh my god. So there's a part. Oh my god. There's a part coming up where, for a moment, we think that Toadswallow has been murdered, and it only lasts a little while. It only lasts a paragraph, or whatever. But oh my god, it really got me, Elliot. This is the most upset I've ever been.
Yeah, I refused to believe it just on the basis that I feel like Toad Swallow has to be going somewhere, and Wobbo couldn't possibly be cruel enough to cut that off. But I'll admit that, like, there was like that second where I believed it, and I was devastated. I was like, you can't take Toad Swallow away from us. He's too. He's not pure. He's not
Mm.
beautiful. He's. I don't know the word for how I feel about Toad Swallow or goblins in
Iconic.
general.
I guess just I think iconic. He's too iconic to be taken away.
No, but like, okay, so we're about to re-meet the goblin whose brain sits in a condom that's going in and out of his head.
Oh yeah.
And, like, he's beautiful and I love him. And I don't know what the word is for, like, that aesthetic of, like, it's, like,
Oh,
hatefully cute, you know?
um, like is it? Are you talking about like Antwood style?
What's that?
You know Antwood. Come on, you must know Antwood. They're most famously known from being in Chappie, the Neil Blomkamp film. They're like a South African um,
Oh,
musical
yeah. Okay,
group,
yeah.
and they practice a counterculture movement called Zeph, which is like this like trashy aesthetic, I guess you would call it. I'm not an expert in it, but it's very like counterculture vibes, and maybe that's what goblins are. They're uh, examples of Zeph aesthetics.
I think that's true for some of them, but I'm talking about, like, do you remember in 5.D we had the little one-eyed beak goblin, and now we've got this little one with the condom brain. Like,
Mm.
it's like corrupted Disney imagery. It's like cute
Yeah,
Disney imagery, but the
right.
inverse. Like,
Yeah,
I just don't know if there's like a term for that. Like,
yeah.
gross.
Trashy cute. Yeah, I don't know. Um. Anyway, so
Yeah. Oh
Toad
wait, so
Swallow,
just before we move on from the
the
condom brain goblin, I want to
yep.
point out Lucy calls it a clear balloon in this
Wait,
chat, which I just thought was hilarious
yeah.
because it's like,
Oh, Lucy.
Lucy, like, you sweet summer child. Like, even Avery knows what's going on here. Like,
Clear balloon. Oh, Lucy. Good times. So yeah, Toad Swallow is causing a ruckus, and is causing enough of a ruckus that Bristow's group thinks it's America out there with throwing goblins at them. So we get confirmed America is still out there. She's not like in some kind
mm,
of Bristow POW camp type of thing. But yeah, there's a ruckus and some back and forth. Toad Swallow gets away, but in the fray, Gashwad is nabbed.
yeah, because basically it sounds like Gash and Totoro. I mean, I love how they both use like trinkets or tricks. Like
Yeah.
Toad Swallow especially, like, he's got that one thing that shoots out like brown and white splooge that I don't like to think too much about.
Yeah.
Um, but like Gashwad is also like, he's such a tricky little fuck. Like, he's getting in there and he's putting in bad nails and stuff. Like, goblins would just be the fucking worst to fight
I know.
against.
Just let them do what they want. You can't you can't deal with them. Just leave it.
Yeah. As an aside though, with all the goblin stuff going on, Lucy has to keep talking John down from sacrificing himself,
Yeah.
which is like, I can't handle. If John dies, like, I'm out. I'll have to quit the story for a few weeks to recover. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I was like, wait, it's just so heartbreaking how willing he is to put himself on the line for the Kenneteers.
It like to the extent that he goes to it so quickly, I think there must be something else going on. Like it must be like him doing a heroic soldier's death actually has him come back, but with more power or something. Like I can't imagine that he's so keen to sacrifice himself in situations like this where it doesn't seem super necessary.
I mean, I that's an optimistic read that he would come back more powerful. Like, I definitely. First of all, I'm willing to believe it just because I think that fits into the whole like cliche soldier stereotype that he's
Yeah,
sort of molded from. Like the fact
yeah,
that he would, like he walked around with Yolda, right? Like, I don't think there's any doubt that like he's connected to the Kenneteers a little bit through that
yes,
Yolda connection, and it's sort of
yeah.
like him being willing to sacrifice himself for them just makes sense. But like also and I guess I'm jumping ahead a little bit in the notes here, but like what I was connecting it to is like he doesn't want the job as the next Carmine.
Mm,
And everyone keeps telling us he's probably gonna die if he
mm,
gets picked, because then that's when everyone else will come for him. So you can't help but think John might just view it as like he knows in a couple of months the big three are gonna be like, "You're our fourth," and then everyone's gonna try and kill him, and they're probably gonna succeed. Like he may think he's close to death anyway. He'd rather die protecting these girls. Like
mm.
I don't know. I mean, a better solution is if he was Lucy's familiar. I
Yeah.
don't think he can do the Carmine role.
Yep.
And then also he's Lucy's familiar, which I see as a win because I think these two have like a really nice connection.
Yeah, me
Um,
too. When Lucy is like, he's reaching out, being like, "Oh, what if I just do a little sacrifice of myself?" And Lucy's just slapping his hand away, like, "No, bad John." It's good times.
um, yeah, I guess we'll see.
Um, so okay, there's this bit where since Gashford is kind of nabbed, they're interrogating him like, "Who sent you?" etc. etc. Um, and he's not giving them anything. He's doing great. But then there's a bit where they're like, "What's your weak? What do they say? What's your weakness?" Is that right? Um,
No, no, I think they're sort of like, why are you here?
oh yeah, that's right. That's right. They say, "Why are you here?" And Gashford's response is, "To fight. I live to fight. I have a deep-seated, horrible insecurities about being too weak." I'm just like, Gashford, you're awesome. Oh my god, it's so
Yeah,
funny.
like honestly, like this was like one of the moments where I was just like, oh, Gashwad isn't just the fourth goblin who does fighting for me anymore. Like he actually has a personality because he's like admitted to this you know thing he has of not wanting to do the job that he does. Like
Yeah.
he wants to get in fights because he's a little dweeb. Um, I love it.
What they say, what I think it's Musa. What Musa says is, "Tell us what you want to keep secret. Why did you come here?" And then that's
I,
Gashward's response, like that's his deep dark secret, is that he's insecure about being too weak. It's, it's so good. Um,
yeah, yeah.
so yeah, Gashwad detonates a bomb. Sorry, I'd written in the notes that John detonates it, but on reread, it's actually Gashwad has set up a bomb that he then detonates to escape. Um, and so Gashwad and Toad just kind of get a few more final blows in attacking these practitioners and then just scamper off. And so the group retreats successfully, heading back to their base before they attempt unsuccessfully to wash up off the nettle wisp that Lucy has on her hand.
Yeah, I mean, like honestly, this little heist thing went pretty well. Like they actually managed to get out unharmed when there were a bunch of practitioners there. Like I don't really know what they thought was going to happen, but yeah.
Yeah. I don't. Yeah, I'm not super sure what the plan was, but I'm glad they just kind of doing things, making problems. You know.
Well, it sounds like the plan was to get Gash and Toadslow to where they could like fuck with this building's foundation so they can get in. Like it's
Oh
sort of like,
yes, that's right. And
it,
so
it,
then
it
that has happened, and now they have like a set of nails that will allow them to break into the BHI fairly easily if they need to.
yeah, or that building at least, the
Mm.
the Bristow building. But it's sort of like, yeah, as one of them says, like it all that work for just a little like groundwork
Mm.
to set up, and it's just like it was, it almost went very far south. Like it's just sort of like they're really going a mile to get an inch here.
Yeah. 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 But you know, the thing that is demonstrably true, and we find out even more so is true in the bonus material this week, is being prepared and setting seeds for things later really pays off to a large extent, right? Um,
Yeah. Let's get to that.
Preparation is the OP superpower in this universe. So yeah, so the nettle wisp stuff, I I kind of wish that Lucy had this nettle wisp on her hand for even longer, because it's the fact that she can't wash it off is like, oh shit, this is going to go in a really interesting direction. And then it gets triggered, and like it's fine. It's a very interesting way of it getting triggered, and it has a lot of interesting impacts. But I kind of wish it. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of that bit in Adventure Time where Finn had a leaf growing out of his hand. You know, he
Yeah,
had
yeah.
the weird grass hand, and it was this
Yeah.
weird plot thread that lasted for ages and really paid off in a really strange and bizarre way. And I just kind of want Lucy to have a nettle wisp sword hand, I guess.
Yeah, I made that same mental leap to the Adventure Time arc because that went for like a season,
Yeah.
um, at least. Yeah, but I mean, obviously, the other thing we got to talk about is though, like the Nettle Wisp isn't gone after it goes off because it's having effects on Lucy's hand. Like it's discoloring it. She's
Yeah.
kind of weird about it. Like this feels like, I mean, we've been waiting. I don't think we ever got the traps Marisica laid out in her 3 gifts. Um, like she gave them
Yes.
9 gifts, and she said there were 3 traps hidden within them.
Mm,
And I think we've maybe got one with
mm.
that time. Lucy kissed. Sorry, Avery kissed Pam.
Yes.
Is this the maybe second one? Maybe even the first one? Like, and what is the trap? Like, why is this happening?
Yeah, what does Marisica get out of this as well? Why would she want this to be the case? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's a trap. Maybe the trap is educational about like being careful what they rely on and stuff like that. I don't know.
Yeah, well, because they look at their other nettle wisp, at the end of next chapter, I think it is, and it's like been growing, and so there's like, yeah, if you leave nettle wisps sitting, they they grow or infect you or something. And like, is that the lesson? Like, that's the risk in setting up these things, like promises like that, is that the power sort of grows and starts to hurt you if you don't use it.
Mm, yeah, maybe that's it.
As an aside with like setting up stuff like that, um, I love how Lucy's starting to build a narrative around like all this stuff with Bristow.
Mm, right.
Uh, like with the spirits. Like
Yes.
she
Oh, just
she
like
does it.
bagging him out audibly to the spirits.
Yeah, she does it in this chapter and the next chapter. But it's like she's. I just think it's like a really cool part of this world that like something Lucy's getting benefit from is just like as they're making their plans, specifically sort of saying to the spirits, "Hey, just a reminder, we're doing this because Bristow's a twat." And,
It's not. You know what it's like. It's like they're going. Oh, okay. We're gonna go get Bristow, and then Lucy goes, "Wait. We're gonna go get Bristow, the piece of shit," and says it
yeah.
just loudly so the spirits can hear. Okay, let's continue. Like it's ridiculous, but it is. I wonder if we'll see it actively pay off, or if we won't get it as concrete confirmation that it's actually helped. But I love it. I think it's hilarious.
Yeah, it's just such a fun story concept because it gives, like, Lucy a reason to sort of monologue about what they're doing and why it's justified, and have it, like, in universe make sense.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, it's great. Um, so yeah, they don't manage to wash up the nettle wisp, so the group go to sleep, only to be awakened by a bang. The nettle wisp has gone off. Somebody was spying on them.
What a way to wake up. Like, just
Yes,
so this loud bang and everyone in the room is like, "What the fuck?"
yeah. Man, it's grim though. So basically, Nicolette triggered it because it seems like she's being forced to basically run into their defenses over and over as a like a canary, basically a coal mine canary, essentially. So they say that Nicolette has agreed to this, but
Mm.
obviously there's probably some arm twisting going on here somewhere.
Oh,
I
I'm
don't know.
sure she agreed to it in the sense she signed up with this Augur coven. They hired her out to Bristow, and she has to do what he says as part of that contract.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
God. I mean, it's just shit. It's so clearly. like it feels analogous to um like taking a prisoner of war and using them to like search for landmines, right? Like that's the level that it feels like we're at here, which is clearly violations of it's a war crime essentially.
I I wouldn't have made that comparison. To me, it's more like because Nicolette chose this to
Mm,
some degree, and it's almost like wait, they basically straight up admit that the reason they're using Nicolette is because she likes them and they like her. So it's almost like it's just that Bristow thing they keep doing where they're like they're drawing this line and trying to move everyone really far either side of it. Um, like if Nicolette has connections to the enemy, they're doing everything they can to push her further into their camp by severing those ties.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, that feels like a war crime to me. Like,
I mean, it's
yes,
shitty at the very least. It's just like it's
mm,
just such a shitty tactic of like, oh, you have friends over there. Let's use this as a tactic to like hurt
mm.
everyone.
Yeah, it's shit regardless. Yeah, it's rough.
Yeah, especially like I can't. Actually, let's talk about Nicolette more at the end of next chapter, I suppose, where she shows up. But also Tashlit heals Lucy here after she's like suffering a bit from the nettle wisp. Um, which I mean, yeah, like I don't. We kept getting told, I think, that Tash was like weak and didn't really have any powers, but she's got like a lot of little ones. Like
Mm,
she's quite versatile.
mm. Yeah, she seems to have a lot of tricks up her sleeve, and we've heard that Tash is kind of similar to uh, a character that she has a. The analogy is she has a bucket of power, and it slowly drips up, and so when
Mm.
it's got enough in there, she can do some cool stuff. But I wonder how much proportionally she has spent just in the past, 2 days or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, and what sort of stuff you can do with it? Because the thing with power in this universe is it's never just like, you have a bucket of charge that you can use for any kind of magic. It's like,
Mm,
you have like Marisica glamour versus Guillerme glamour. Like there's different types of power for different things. Um, and she seems to have like quite an array of powers. She can heal people. She can shoot acid water that's boiling or whatever the fuck. I don't quite understand. Like, yeah. Like,
mm,
I wonder what god she is born of. I
mm.
don't know if we've had that actually like confirmed or if there's any strong guesses from the community.
Mm. Yeah. Uh, yeah, I don't think I mean the one theme that we've seen is there seems to be something to do with like uh Hebrew linguistics in her name, right?
Hmm.
So presumably that's a clue, but I can't dive in any
Yeah.
more than that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm the same.
Yeah.
No idea.
Um So yeah, they go back to sleep after this, I guess, and then wake up properly in the morning. And Lucy makes a call to her therapist.
Yeah. So I guess quickly before we go to the therapist call, because we're going to spend a while there, I imagine. Um,
Mm,
Lucy hits a bit of a stumbling block at first because she's really struggling to draw the simple diagram she wants to draw because her like symbols keep getting altered to sort of fit the earring. And like I saw this and I was just like, one day I'm going to learn the fucking lesson that these books keep teaching me, which is that the metaphor is never just a metaphor in these stories. Like we literally had a whole book tell us about how the implement is something that like alters your diagram, especially if it's jewelry. And then Lucy gets an implement, and now it's like affecting her diagrams. Like I was like,
mm.
it's so obvious in retrospect, but I just didn't see this coming at all.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I guess we didn't expect it to have such a drawback, but I love that it does. I love that and presumably the diagram troubles we've been seeing are setting up some bigger reflection of this drawback that we will see. I expect.
Well, I wouldn't call it a drawback as much as a
Sure, a flavor. Yeah,
specialization.
yeah, sure.
Like I think like once because there's this funny moment where like Verona kind of gets it more than Lucy and has to like help
Yes.
Lucy figure herself out, which is that's what friends are for.
Mm,
Um, and yeah, like I wouldn't be surprised if it was more powerful because if Lucy, if it's the earring that's affecting this stuff, I think it was probably moving her more towards stuff to do with sound blocking or eavesdropping. So it's kind of like she was probably able to build a more powerful diagram to block people listening in, um, because of the earring.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. You're right. Maybe drawback was the wrong word, but yeah, I just think it's interesting. I think we're setting up that this exists, and I think we will see it in a more magnified role at some point in the future. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. Also, while I was quickly talking about how like Verona gets it more than Lucy, there's also like this one little moment where Verona suggests, "Oh, you could do a star or a sun here," and Lucy
Mm.
picks the sun. And yeah, I guess something we should talk about more. So obviously, we had this mission that we covered from like most of the episodes so far, and that was Lucy and Avery who were out there because Verona's on the immaterial team. Like she's off with Tashlet and Alpy later on, and we kind of skipped over that they went and do that. And it's like there's more and more of this divide coming up between Verona and the other two. Like Lucy and Avery are consistently siding on the team of like Light, or they went with Guillerme versus Marisica, who
Mm.
Verona seems to lean a bit more into Marisica, and she's like this dark immaterial stuff. Like I'm interested to see where this goes. Like Verona is sort of starting to walk a bit of a different path to the other two,
Mm.
and it's becoming more and more tangible.
Mm. Yeah. What do you think the end result of that will be?
I'm hoping that it'll just sort of be a statement about how you don't all have to be the same to work together, like kind of like what the Kennett others represent, like because you could see this idea that Lucy and Avery are walking down this certain path and Verona's going down the other one, so they're gonna lose contact and stop being friends.
Mm.
Like I mean, it could be that, but I'm more interested in the idea that it's like just because that's the case, it doesn't mean you have to stop totally being friends. Like maybe you drift apart a bit, but like the fact that they could still be an effective team, I would actually make them stronger. Like the fact that they're not all the same.
Hmm. Yeah. True. So maybe it's not a point of difference, but a point of unity and strength. Yeah.
Yeah, like that. That's what the Kennett others are so strong for, and it's what we said the Kennetteers are as well. The fact that they like fill in each other's weaknesses and stuff. Like the fact that Verona's going down this different path might be something they worry about, and then actually it turns out to be a a source of strength.
Mm. Yeah. We'll have to wait and see, I suppose. Um. Okay. So here's another thing. We raised the idea of a triple agent in our reflections episode, and there's a bit where they say, Nicolette was forced to spy on us, etc. Glad that it's Nicolette instead of somebody else because Um, it if sorry, glad that Nicolette was forced to spy on them because if Nicolette hadn't, the Netherwisp might have continued to grow and fucked up Lucy's arm. And Verona's response is maybe Nicolette knew that, and then says, in what I'm now realizing is blatant foreshadowing. It'd be nice to have a conversation with her. But yeah, so the idea that Nicolette might be the triple agent is raised here, which is something I think is fun.
Yeah. But the thing about triple agents is when you're that many agents in, what if they're quadruple agents?
But Elliot, you've forgotten. If they're a quadruple agent, there's a high chance they could be a quintuple agent. um,
um, yeah, I don't know. I think it's going to be more interesting to explore a Nicolette who's like I just keep coming back to this idea I've had since 2.z where she was sort of like, oh, I'm going to get out of Alexander's thumb and I'm going to join this Augur Coven and then everything's going to be perfect.
mm,
Was her vibe in 2.z. It's like the first thing this Augur Coven looks to have done is put her on Bristow's side in this war.
yeah,
So like, I hope 7.4 is just going to be Nicolette being like, yeah, so I thought this was
it's
a good
worse.
idea.
Yeah,
It fucking sucks.
it's worse. No, yeah, I'm on board with that idea too. I think that's hilarious.
So I don't think she's like the triple agent like yet, but I imagine 7.4 is Nicolette going to come up and be like, hey guys, can I be a triple agent, please?
Mm, yeah, no, I don't think it'll be triple agent in that explicit of a sense. I think it will be Nicolette realizing, yes, I'm on Bristow's team, but I actually
Yeah,
and I have
I
to act
don't
on
want to.
his team, but I want to support you guys in some ways, right? Like,
Yeah, I agree.
um, which I guess means she's a triple agent, but it's not as like there won't be any briefcases or moustache and glasses involved. I think is the key
No,
difference.
she's not doing any Machiavellian planning. She's just
Yes,
flying by the seat of her pants, triple agent.
yes, exactly. So, in a continuation of a classic Wildbow theme, this therapist is very kind, level-headed, and wonderful. Every single time a therapist appears in a Wildbow story, they're pretty much unilaterally awesome. So, thumbs up to that.
I don't think a wild bow therapist has ever made a mistake.
Mm,
Um, I mean, I think the way Dr. Mona really wins us over here right at the start is like the first real chunk of advice she gives Lucy is basically exactly what the earring told Lucy at the end of last arc, where
mm,
she's like, you've got to trust your instincts.
mm,
Your reader people's probably better than you give it credit for. And it was like,
yeah,
hey, that's what the earring said. You're all right.
yeah. Maybe she. Oh my god. Maybe
Uh,
she is the earring Elliot. Oh my god. What a twist.
I could send you the tweet I made in my live read where I was like, everybody get ready for Ruben's Dr. Mona is a practitioner theory.
Mm,
Um, but you took it a step further,
yeah.
so well done.
Yeah, I did. Um. Anyway.
But yeah, no, I mean, yeah, like obviously Dr. Mona just gives great advice. She's like encouraging Lucy to connect with the Kenneteers, like she's offering suggestions for the Verona problem. She suggests that maybe Lucy should check in on if there's an Avery problem, which based on next chapter is very good advice.
Mm,
Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, Dr. Mona for head of the BHI, frankly.
mm. Yeah. Yeah, I like it. Head of BHI, Dr. Mona.
If there's anything everyone in this place needs, it's a fucking therapist.
I mean, yeah. Yep.
Oh, uh, and also, also sorry, the therapist brings up well, one of the quotes that Dr. Mona says is she says about that. I wanted to touch on something from a conversation yesterday evening, and then they sort of get interrupted, but like Lucy responds very negatively to this. She like gets a huge feeling in her gut, and then like they don't have to worry about this. But what was this about? This feels like a hanging thread that will very much come back to bite us in the ass.
Yeah. What is the conversation? I have
Because
no idea.
I think Lucy might have talked to Dr. Mona on the phone last night, but I
Mm.
would have thought that would be the conversation from yesterday evening, not a
Yes.
conversation. So, who else is Dr. Mona talking to that she would like? Is Dr. Mona also seeing Lucy's mum? And there's like some, presumably consensual, like trading of information via Dr. Mona, or like what?
Yes. That would be my I think that's a good thought. Or or a conversation she had with somebody else that she's like that's an idea that she wants to raise maybe. I don't
Yeah,
know. Yeah.
this is definitely something to put in the old like mind memory bank
Or
for
yeah,
like it's gonna come up later.
maybe Dr. Mona is talking to Miss and there's something from their conversation. Um
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
yeah, I think that's probably it. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, they get interrupted. The conversation gets interrupted because the parents have been called and some people have been grounded. uh,
uh yeah, again, this is like a bit like my response to the mission going sideways last night,
mm,
or almost going sideways. I was a bit like, what did they think was going to happen? Like they put all of their eggs in this Elizabeth's workshop basket, and then it's sort of like, yeah, so Bristow is just going to refund her and kind of invalidate it because her parents want to pull her out. And I was like, well, I mean, that's pretty easy. Like now what? Like, yeah, I don't know. This just sort of happened. I was like, well, fuck. But also, what did they think? Like, did nobody think that this might be an avenue he would try?
yeah. Um, yeah. I mean, they knew it was going to happen, surely, right? Of course, he would just be like, "Hey, there's like." I mean, he doesn't even need to be so obvious about it. He can just kind of make sure that they find out about it. It wouldn't be that difficult.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. Anyway, the situation is continuing to worsen. The resistance base has now been compromised.
Yeah, it's just like when they lose the resistance base in episode 5 of Star Wars.
Sure, I think that also happens in episode 7 and 8.
But hey, while we're talking about Star Wars,
Oh yeah, what
have we talked about the high ground?
the high ground? What is that, Elliot? What are you talking about?
That's our bonus content show where my sister Georgia joins us and we talk about Star Wars. As you can
Mm,
see, we really know what we're talking about in that show. Um, but yeah, no, it's real fun. Check it out.
But what do
Blatant
you?
self promo in the middle
But
of our podcast.
Elliot, what if I want some kind of, for this special time of year? What if I want some kind of holiday themed Star Wars content? Do you have anything for me there?
Yeah, it's actually next week is our Star Wars holiday special high ground episode. So I mean watch the holiday special and then come listen to that episode.
Ah.
You will regret it.
And with that, let's get back to finishing off Gone Ahead 7.2. Yeah, I mean, basically, again, and this is my vibe at the end of every single chapter in this BHI conflict. I still just feel like there's no idea of what is going to happen. Like, where is what is going to happen next? Like, is Bristow going to die? Are they going to just end up bowing to him and letting him be headmaster? Like, anything could happen, literally.
Yeah, first of all, I don't know how to fix this. Like, I can't think of what a good win is, but I also have read enough Wild Boar stories to know that I shouldn't necessarily expect a good, clean win. So even if there was one, like, yeah, there's so many ways this could go. And I mean, that sort of gets to Lucy. Like, I love this chapter sort of ends with like Lucy just sitting down and thinking, man, I have so much to do. I've got like 50 things I could do. So I'm going to sit here and do none of them. And I was like, well, that's a depressingly relatable frame of mind.
Or is it a nice, relaxing, meditative vibe?
That was not the impression I got.
Yeah, fair enough.
I got that kind of like, I mean, you've been there. I've definitely been there where it's sort of like you've got so much to do that you're panicking so much that you just kind of don't do any of it. And then like 2 hours later, you're like, oh, I've made this much, much worse.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Hopefully that's not what happens. Okay. So yeah, that's the end of Gone Ahead 7.2. Next we dive into Gone Ahead 7.3. We're in Avery's perspective, and Avery and the gang are looking for a place to stay now that their main base of operations has been lost.
Yeah, and this chapter sort of opens up, like, it throws us again, like, in media res. Like, we
Yes.
sort of don't know what they're doing out here. There's a box, and we don't know what's in the box.
Yep.
It's like, yeah, like, both of the chapters this week really just throw us kind of into the middle of whatever operation is happening. Which I think is, like, a cool way of just, like, as readers, keeping us, like, on the back foot of like, because, this is a shit show of a war. And stuff's going all over the place, and you sort of feel that with the way each chapter is kind of disconnected because it jumps ahead a few hours from where the last one ended up and just puts us in the middle of whatever the next little bit of guerrilla warfare is.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It's good. It makes it really helps emphasize the messiness of the conflict.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's good phrasing.
There's a little bit of a water scene here, a little bit of a splashing around in the water scene, I guess. And I was just surprised that Tasht likes the water. I mean, it makes sense in reflection, but I just kind of had her pegged as fire type. You know what I mean?
I didn't quite have her pegged as fire type, but you're right. I didn't really think anything of her like having to do with water, and then she like hopped into the water, and I was like, oh yeah, her mum's a sea monster. This makes sense. Yeah, but no, I was the same. Like I was just like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I'm an idiot.
Yeah, I guess we just again don't ascribe too many labels to these Kennet others, especially others in general, but these ones especially.
Yeah, true. We also like at the start of this, I really want to call out how we see that really happy kind of mellow Verona that Lucy was talking about last chapter. Like she spends so much of this chapter that we're in like joking around and having fun. Verona like makes that joke to Avery about the handwriting. There's the bit where like she annoys Avery by constantly calling out her name. Like Verona is just having a ball, and I think there's like even a point where John is like, okay, we can have fun, but you got to still be serious. And then like Verona starts making even more jokes. It's just like this is the concerning part of Verona falling into this world that you brought up and that Lucy brought up. Like there's a time and a place for being this kind of happy and jokey.
Yeah. Is she too? Yeah, yeah. Is she too chill in these scenes? I think the answer is probably yes. Right.
I would think so. Like, it's good to see. I kind of love it, but at the same time, I'm just like, is this really the time?
Mm, mm, yeah, probably not. Um, there's a bit where Toadswallow is giving or attempts to give Avery advice on girls. She wisely chooses not to get advice from him, but that's terrible for us as the audience because I really want to know what is the lady advice that Toadswallow would have given Avery.
Yeah, I would have loved to see it. I think it's funny as well because he's sort of like, "Oh, I'll give you advice that will make girls turn their heads," but he doesn't specify like in a good way. Like,
Um, wait, what do you
I'm
mean?
just saying, if Avery hopped on a bus and ripped a mad fart that everyone heard, a ton of women are going to turn their heads to look her way. Not helpful though in terms of romance.
Mm, yes, true. It's not really what Avery wants, is it?
No, I mean, I guess that's the thing. I think the kinds of women Toad Swallow would like, probably not the sorts of women that Avery is going to like.
Um, yeah, almost certainly that's the case. I think.
um, but yeah, I mean, the other thing, obviously, Toad Swallow gives Avery some advice on, something that comes up, is like, she's using the Guillerme glamour to perk herself up and make herself confident. And Toad Swallow's like, that's fakery bullshit. You gotta actually, take some punches to get stronger.
Mm,
Um, and I think, yeah, I don't know. I thought this was interesting because I was sort of like, I kind of agree with Toadswallow. Like, if she builds up her whole confident persona on the glamour, it's not going to have strong foundations, I would assume. But then on the other hand, it's like if Avery's way of getting confident is going out and taking some punches and she keeps failing, like she's not going to get any better either. Um, so sort of like I don't know. I think like it's like that combo, It's like you use Guillerme's glamour as a bit of medication to get yourself started, and then you can reinforce it with real life stuff. But
mm,
yeah, like it's. I don't think these have to be mutually exclusive. I guess.
mm. True. Yeah, you're right. There's an element of like I don't know, fake it till you make it type of vibe, right? Like
Yeah.
Avery is doing this thing where she's giving herself check marks. There's nothing wrong with necessarily turning some heads to boost your confidence and then using that to transition it into a relationship or whatever, you know?
Yeah, well, just because we've had this Avery glamour thing sitting over us for a long time now, and I'm trying to think where it could go, and like I think that's the positive outcome is yeah, like you use it as a kickstart as a boost, but then like if every time she does a good thing, she continues to rely on giving herself the glamour ticks. That is maybe where you're too leaning too much into the glamour, and I'm worried. But if it's like if you reach this threshold where you suddenly just actually, you know what, I am confident and I can just be me and take the real world punching side that Toadstool is in. Maybe that's the healthy road.
Mm, yeah, maybe it is. It's fair. So yeah,
Guess
you
we'll
should
see.
have taken Toadswallow's advice, Avery.
that's the real lesson here.
So yeah, we get a bit of the emphasis of the downside of goblins here, which is they're clearly very strong, but also a big sleepy babies. They what do they sleep like? They're basically koalas, right? Like
Yeah,
they have a chance at turning into a drop bear and being really powerful, but they also just sleep.
yeah. I think it was like I think we saw a quote that was like 16 or 18 hours a day
Yeah,
they
some
sleep.
huge amount of sleep.
Which yeah, like that's about what koalas do as well. So it's apt.
Yeah,
Um,
maybe they are just koalas. Oh my god, we've got so many cool theories coming up this episode. Um,
Canadians just haven't seen koalas before, so they go
yeah,
with koalas.
Waldo saw a koala at the zoo once, and this is the closest thing he can remember to what it looked like.
um,
Ah,
But yeah, no, I especially really like this as well because I hadn't really made this connection before. But the idea that goblins sleep like 18 hours a day is such a perfect encapsulation of them as like the ugly parts of humanity. Because like the idea that with your free time or whatever, you just get to sit there and like sit in bed for 18 hours is generally seen as like lazy and good for nothing, which is like
mm,
part of the goblin niche.
mm,
So I just kind of like that as you know the metaphor and the mechanics of this world once again kind of blending together in a neat way.
yeah, definitely. Um, so yeah, they it seems like this mission is them finding a place to lay low while also getting Alpy out of here. and maybe even finding the goblins a safe place to lay low.
Yeah.
But as they're on their way, Alpy reveals a fun note that she's kind of seen with her dream stalking, which is there are definitely weak links at the school. People are having bad dreams from stress because they are not equipped to deal with this situation.
um. Yeah. Although the other thing she mentions is that
Yes.
she can do dream hookups for them, where they can
Mm,
give her a name and she'll put two people on the same like dream frequency, and they
dreamscape
can
or
have
whatever, yeah.
they can have a chat,
Yeah,
which
which
is
is
like
cool.
we need to see that, like, because it's going to be like there's going to have to be some thing to it, right? It's not gonna be two people in a white room having a conversation, right? Like there's people's subconscious is gonna come screaming into this conversation.
Yeah, presumably we will have a weird, strange dream sequence conversation.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if it even like if you're both in dreams, is it as simple as you just have a conversation, or is it going to be like your dreamscapes and your subconsciousnesses combine and collide?
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I love it though because I mean, we've already seen stuff like Alcazar implement stuff where it's
Yeah.
taking personality traits and making them literal. So I always love that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I imagine this would be like similar-ish.
Yeah. Can we touch on the thing where Alpy's giving people information based on their dreams? I don't know. Like, is this a violation of something? Like, I don't know. I mean, it's on the line. It's like using
Yeah.
what you
It,
see
it
in people's
is.
dreams against them. It's kind of, yeah. There's the word where they describe it as icky, right? Avery calls it icky. Yeah.
Yeah, and well, and then Lucy calls it icky but necessary, which I think is where I've landed.
Yeah,
Where I'm
which is
like,
always an interesting line to draw.
yeah, it's sort of like this is gross, but if we can use it for, yeah, you're right. It just feels, I don't know. But I
Yeah.
suppose what else did you bring Alpy there for? You know?
Yeah, exactly. I guess it's true. That's what she's here for. Um, so yeah, Cass and Macaulay are the weak links on the student side, and Ray also gets a mention. Interestingly, he's like obviously not chill with it, but it's hard. It's weird. Like, yeah, I don't know. It's hard to get what his vibe is and what he will be interested in doing or what he'll be willing to do as a result. I don't know. It's yeah.
Yeah. I don't think this tells us anything about Ray because we already knew that he was kind of useless and not sleeping right. Like that started even before all this went down. Um, so I don't think this tells us anything new. It's just reminding us, hey, yeah, Raymond is here and he's, you know, kind of fucking uselessly stirring on morality as ever. Um, so I think it's just I feel like this is just a reminder that like, yeah, Ray's out there and he's a bit of an idiot. He
Mm.
might come into it soon.
Mm. Yeah, we'll see. It's hard to know if Ray's going to play a part or what part Ray will play.
Yeah. I mean the two other like girls that they might want to turncoat, I guess. I assume that is the plan.
Mm.
Um are interesting because like Cass's dream is pretty straightforward. Like we've already heard how she gets no good opportunities because her family is, misogynistic and shit, so they can sort of promise to not treat her as a second class citizen and she might turn sides. Like that makes sense to me.
Mm.
Uh, Macaulay's almost more interesting because like her dream is, this like red door, which to me symbolizes like the violence of her family,
Mm.
and she's kind of like trying to get out, and then the door keeps opening wider, and Alexander's there. So I feel like the implication of this is quite obviously she doesn't want to go down the path of her family,
Mm.
and Alexander might be her escape. But like, yeah, I mean, I guess it's just like it's just another statement on practitioner families. Like, we've got Fernanda as our interlude person last at the end of last arc. It's sort of like these people get forced into being a member of their family whether they want to or not.
Mm. Yeah.
And Macaulay's maybe someone who doesn't want to be defined by violence. Like we saw her sister last chapter, and like when she didn't deliver, she fell face first into whatever the fuck that
Yes.
thing Toad Swallow made was. Like it's not a
Yeah.
good life.
No, it's
Um,
rough.
so I get Macaulay not wanting to get amongst that.
Yeah, definitely. I can see why you would want to not be a part of that vibe.
Yeah. So yeah. I can't wait to see where we go with these two.
Yeah.
Because Cass just makes sense. Like, she's so obviously already shitty at her family for being misogynist, whereas Macaulay would be, I think, more of a get just because the Henniger family seems united, but actually, you know, they're not. Like, I don't know. It's kind of more shocking to explore.
Yeah. Um, so the gang find a cave and send Alpy off to do her nightly chores before they then take a moment to chat and plan.
Well, also they make some time to chat and plan before
Yes,
sending Alpy
true.
off, which very much upsets the Alpy,
Mm.
which I thought was hilarious because just like Alpy being like, "So drop, make them stop," and then there's like that boat where she just like falls on the floor and puts her hands on her head. Uh, she's just such a like this idea that Alpy just has this routine and she and the universe just want her to stick to it so strictly. It's just always so hilarious to me.
Mm. Yeah.
Like her
Yeah.
everything is an inconvenience vibe. It's just consistently hilarious.
Yes, true. Um, it's a fun time, although it's really Alpy's accent is really strong in this sequence, right?
I mean, yeah, there's definitely like I usually have like a Scots dictionary open in another tab
Mm.
when she features prominently because it can even be hard to tell what's like her accent distorting a word and what is just like Scottish slang.
Yes.
Um, I mean, luckily, it doesn't usually matter too much because whenever there's like something important, one of the other characters will like translate it into English. But like, yeah, I don't know. I find it quite fun, but sometimes it's very much like, the fuck did I just read?
Yeah. Or I'll wait for it to try and get it from context clues for how the other characters respond, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Um, yeah. Anyway, so yeah, there's also a tantalizing line where John mentions there are major forces keeping an eye on him, which is presumably the judges. That's what
yeah.
Avery thinks immediately. But yeah, God, it's very fun to obsess over.
I mean, it'd better be the judges. Like, last thing we need is more major forces in this story. Um, like there's already enough the Kenneteers have to deal with. Uh, yeah, I guess we sort of touched on this. Like I've got this read on John as somebody who maybe wants to avoid them, and that's why he's aware of the fact that they're staring at him.
Mm.
But it also makes you think: what are the three judges' opinions on this whole shit show?
Yeah, like, do they even think that it's relevant to this scenario? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, because I guess the thing we've had set up right is they're the lords of all the areas that practitioners don't lord over. So, like, maybe it's not their jurisdiction, but then I guess at the same time, the BHI isn't actually the areas these practitioners are based in. It's like their little secluded hub.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I don't know. Like, I almost want the judges to show up so that we can get their opinions on all this, see how they think it
Mm.
fits into the cosmos.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder if they would even have an opinion. You're right. You're right. It's very interesting to think about what the judges care about.
I could see their vibe being like, these are the fuckwits we're ceding ground to. Like,
Mm.
really?
Mm.
You know, we lost to these people.
Yeah, interesting. Maybe. I wonder. Yeah, I don't know. Who knows? Um, So, the gang is interrupted from their chit chat by gunfire. A fight has broken out. John started shooting at something, and so Avery rushes through the Warrens to reach it.
Yeah, great choice of locale to dip into. Very fun.
Yeah, very casual dipping into another dimension. Like, and it doesn't even come up. Avery doesn't even think, oh, should I go above ground with the rope or should I go through the Warrens, etc. Like, she's just like, all right, let's dive into the Warrens, let's do it. And it obviously works out fine-ish, I guess. But it feels strange that she doesn't even think, oh, is it quicker for me to just jump rope there? Like, yeah, I don't know.
I think she retroactively mentions that it was to stay out of John's way.
Yes.
So she didn't actually get clipped by a bullet, which makes
Yes.
sense.
That does make
Bull-
sense.
Bullets aren't great. Um, I mean, what I love is like the Warrens here end up being so much worse because it's like the Kennett Warrens are actually kind of like sanitized, which,
Yes.
considering the whole hollow that they have there, like in retrospect makes sense. But
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Warrens are fascinating. It's like this literal sort of underbelly of the world where all the rotten and gross things people don't want to think about end up. That's sort of like how I'm reading it. Um, like, God, you could write whole books about going into the Warrens. Like, it's so cool that there's like, because she sticks to like the top layer, but it's like you can keep going down the tunnels and there's bigger, scarier goblins and like other dark places. Like, it's so rich and it's a place we've spent literally 20 paragraphs in.
Mm, mm, yeah. Yeah, I love these dimensions. Every time we go into one of these parallel dimensions, they're just so fun, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
I would
more.
love to have a couple of chapters exploring the Warrens. I don't think there's going to be a need for that, but like you could see how like fun and easy that would be.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Uh,
okay, Avery arrives and uh she's right in the midst of things. This person they're attacking is kind of like a ghost with a plastic bag over his head, and a very strange kind of fight kicks off. It feels kind of video gamey.
mm,
Basically,
mm.
a race to find, well, a red bird or just something out of place, basically.
Yeah, each round has some sort of target to go either forwards or backwards.
Yes.
Uh, it takes a while to figure out. Like it's a wild fight to read the first time because you just have no idea what the fuck's going on, or at least I didn't.
Yes.
It was really only the second time that it really all clicked into place. Uh, as a quick aside, I love this synergy that comes up between Lucy and Avery. Because
Mm,
like Lucy's like, oh yeah, run off and be the scout, and if you like whisper what you're seeing, I'll hear it. And I was like, that's some real fucking good. Like, that's a cool move.
mm.
I hope we get to see a lot of that because like Avery can now go and do whatever the fuck and kind of stay in touch with Lucy, like radio back what she's seeing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. The earring really opens up some interesting possibilities for the group, doesn't it?
Yeah, and like we saw how useful it was in the last chapter. Like it, like Lucy overheard so much of what the other practitioners were saying as they're doing. Like, it's fucking useful.
Mm,
Definitely
yeah.
need to get some implements for the rest of the gang.
Yeah. Um so yeah, it's a weird fight. It's like this ticking clock that happens in this fight. And yeah, you're right. You don't really understand what's going on at the start, but it's like you're chucked into a puzzle box that is shaking around and the walls are closing in and you have to solve it before it literally kills you.
Yeah, I mean the puzzle box aspect of it becomes more and more literal as this thing starts shaking down the size of the arena.
Mm,
Um, but at first I was just confused for most of this my first time through, and honestly, even my second time, I don't think I've 100% got all of it. But
yeah.
I really like that Avery opens this by trying to talk to it. Like she doesn't, if it was me and I came out of the Warrens and there's like some ghosty techno mancer thing with a plastic bag on its head that looks scary, I'd
Mm,
probably shoot first and ask questions later. I'm not that good enough of a person. Whereas Avery's like, hey, can we be cool? And this thing sort of says no. And she's like, okay, then.
okay, I guess we got to fight. Yeah, no, for sure. It's interesting. You're right. It's great. It's a very Avery thing to do to be like, do we definitely have to fight before? Let's make sure that there's no peaceful way to resolve this. And she even asks, "Do you mean us harm?" And the guy like nods, like, "Oh, okay, this is a
Yeah,
fight then."
yeah. um,
Good times.
Yeah, but yeah. So obviously, like this fight, goes on for a while. Avery sort of figures it out, and it turns into a race, which is very much her element.
Yeah.
Um, but she comes pretty close to dying. It doesn't actually look like she was going to win when the other two come and save her.
Mm,
Uh,
yes.
and I mean, it's lunchtime by the time she comes out, so like we don't. It sounds like she was in there for a while. Um, bit of a
Yeah.
reminder for us and the Kenneteers that this shit can get pretty serious. Like Avery maybe almost died here.
Yeah, it's just as Avery is starting to figure it out, you get the distinct vibe that her train of thought is becoming less and less coherent, right? Like the fight feels like it gets a lot more abstract from the narration and from the description as it reaches the end. And it feels to me like Avery is like slipping, like even as she is figuring it out and trying to fight back, she is slipping into basically losing the plot, really, right?
Yeah, well, doesn't this thing like suck the oxygen out of the area it's in? So it's kind of like just she's not able to breathe as
Uh,
easily, I guess.
well, definitely at times it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, like in general, do you have any theories as to what this bag face is? Like from a kind of other. I know we're trying to like move away from just broadly classifying others,
Mm,
but like, what
but
is this
let's give
thing?
it a go. Yeah, I have no idea. Have you got any thoughts? What do you think?
I mean, I made connections to like climate change
Mm,
or modernization. Like, it literally starts to make the world smaller.
mm,
It was doing some technomancery stuff that gets brought up in the story, but it's like, the plastic bag vibe, the way it sort of rips oxygen. I was like, I don't know, is this some sort of manifestation of climate change? I don't know.
yeah.
I got some loose connection to maybe climate change and modernization. I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense to me. The plastic bag and the like constricting vibe of it, I think works. Maybe even just like drowning or suffocation in general. But yeah, yeah. I think it. We don't know enough to say definitively, but I like the idea.
Yeah, we need to find out who sent it because then we can sort of see what school of practice they're in, and that'd probably
Yes,
help.
yes, definitely. Um, yeah. So Lucy and Avery arrived just in time to save her from. Sorry, Lucy and Verona arrived just in time to save Avery from Mr. Bagface, and then they head back to the school to recuperate.
Yeah, and they use one of the items they confiscated from Bree/Z and like half the story ago to do it. So that's a good bit of payback. Uh, that's the lesson here. Always steal shit from people you captured and keep it because you'll be able to use it later.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great moral. Yeah, so yeah, they head back to school. I was actually a little confused at first by this, with the fact that they were like sneaking around and clearly trying to not get caught before, but now they're just like going back to school and hanging out. But I guess it's because they explicitly had others with them that they had snuck in, so that's probably what they were trying to do. And now they don't.
Well, I also think at night, that was like when Bristow was going to be like imposing stuff on them, whereas now it's like the school day and they can just
Yeah.
like the school has to still operate. Like that's sort of the one big weakness Bristow has is he does have to keep the school operating to some degree.
Mm,
Um, so yeah, I think it was just like at nighttime there was more freedom for the other students to hassle them and impose bullshit on them, whereas they can't really do that today.
mm, yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I mean, like the big moment for me is like when they openly bring Tash and John in with them, like they'd sort of I don't know, I'd kind of got the impression they were sort of keeping the fact that they just brought these others in like on the DL, but it's like
Mm,
yeah, like they just sort of walk in hand with them. And again, Lucy takes John's hand, future familiars. Tash takes Verona's hand, future familiars. Avery's holding Snowdrop. I can
Future
go either way on that
familiars,
one.
yeah, yeah, you can see it. Um,
Um, yeah, I think I made a joke in my live read too. To jump back to Tash a little bit, I made a joke in my live read that was like, Tashlet is Verona's new BFF now. Like, sorry, Lucy.
yeah,
Um, and honestly, like that started as a joke, but the more this goes on, the more I'm like, actually, though, like I hope Verona takes Tashlet as a familiar. They seem like a great fit for each other. Probably too
yeah,
early to commit to something like that, but seems like it's promising.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think so. Um, so yeah, they get back to their room and they are trying to plan what they should do next, but they get interrupted by Nicolette, who wants to have a powwow.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, like Verona and Lucy are really leading this chat that gets interrupted because I feel like Avery's just freaking out. Like she's kind of proving Dr. Mona exactly right. Like Dr. Mona was like to Lucy, "Hey, you should check. Avery maybe isn't okay, and she's just not telling you.
Mm,
She has a history of being closed off. You should go ask her if she's okay." And then we jump into Avery's head next chapter, and uh, after that whole thing, Avery's basically having a meltdown
yeah,
again. And
yeah,
she's like, "Oh, I can't let the others know. I don't want to come across as whiny." It's
yeah.
just like, "Oh
God,
God,
Avery.
Lucy, please ask."
Yeah, please, broach that topic with her. Build that bridge.
um, yeah, and so it's the six of them in this room, right? We've got three Kenneteers,
Yes.
the fourth Kenneteer that's Snowdrop, and then Tashlet and John.
Yeah.
And I'm now committing to the idea. All three of them, they'll do the familiar bond, and the sequel to Pale will actually just be the six of them living in a house. It's like a sitcom.
It's Full House. It's Full House, but half the
Yeah.
creatures are monsters, half the characters are monsters. Yeah, no.
You got like wacky cousin Tashlet with Verona who gets caught up in her bullshit. You got John and Lucy kind of trying to keep everything under control,
Mm,
and Avery, I don't know, just keeps bringing idiots into the house, or is trying to wrangle Snowdrop, the rowdy child,
mm,
coming
mm.
soon to
Yeah.
CBS.
Yep. Disney Plus announced it a few days ago. Yeah. So they're obviously all six of them are here planning, and I'm just kind of like worried. I'm nervous. Like, again, I don't know where this is going because it's like I don't feel like they really have a plan. I don't feel like they even really have any strong ideas that could be put together to make a plan. Like, the closest thing they have is Verona thinking about how she can get Bristow's thanks and transfer it to the brownies, and then the brownies will attack Bristow. And that's like, okay, like it's a seed of an idea, but it's not enough to build a plan around, right?
No, and I'd also question if it is a good idea. Like, I think Miss was like, be careful using this with the practice. Um, like, surely it would be easy for Bristow to prove he didn't give his regards to the brownies and Verona did, and then like have it bounce back.
Mm,
Like, I would want to be very sure before trying this plan. I feel like there's ways it could like bounce back and be very bad.
mm,
Um, and yeah, but yeah, you're right. Overall, I'm just kind of like they're full out of ideas. Basically, their idea up until now was we could hold out in Elizabeth's workshop and come up with a plan, and now that's gone. And so they're just here, and it's like hopefully Nicolette has the answers because I don't think they do.
mm. Yeah, they need something. I don't think they have enough. Yeah, I don't know. They need Nicolette to be like, here's what you should do.
Yeah, well, they need more like allies who are good.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
like that's their problem. Like they talk about wanting to get Jess just so they can have a senior student, and
Yeah.
Jess was like the least senior student of the senior students.
Yeah, and clearly not the kind of person that would make a great ally when compared to like Nicolette or Zed if they were really on side.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, yeah, but a good cliffhanger. Nicolette coming in and being like, "Let's talk." I mean,
Oh.
who knows what that is?
Yeah, this is yeah, it is. It's a very good cliffhanger.
Yeah.
I was like, you can't end it there. That's cruel. Um, yeah, I mean, I guess we'll see next week. Somehow it's even more exciting after the sort of cliffhanger we get in this comic that we're about to cover as well. It's like these two cliffhangers sort of feed into each other for me, and I'm just like, oh god, we need 7.4 so bad.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. Um, we'll have to see. Let's find out. But we're not going to 7.4 now. Now we're going to the bonus material, the extra material for 7.3, which was the Borrowed Eyes comic. So the comic starts, and immediately we know that we're in Alexander's head, and he's talking with Y, and we don't really know exactly what's going on immediately. They're just kind of hanging out, chit-chatting. Looks like they're just talking about the odd jobs that Y is doing.
I kind of got the impression Alexander has had Y come and pick him up to
Mm.
take him to Bristow's place, like on the way to this parasite god thing that, or god parasite thing that Y has to do.
Yes, but I got that impression too, but that was on my second read through. I definitely didn't. I
It's a bit
felt
confusing intentionally.
untethered immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially because they mention a parasite god. I mean, like at the very start, and I'm like, oh shit, is this like before the BHI started? Because obviously that was, how it started. But no, that's that's proven incorrect almost immediately. So the parasite god is just kind of back or still around.
No, this is the other thing. The parasite god came up in 4.1
Mm.
as like because remember Avery had her friend who was the finder who took her to Zoomtown, and it was like
Right.
his dad or something,
Yes.
or it was through them. Like they were fighting because I remember because there was that whole thing where he was like, it's not a parasite god, it's a god parasite.
Wait, but wasn't the parasite god also the thing that they turned into the BHI? Or am I getting different things mixed up?
No, I think that was just a different god. It was
Oh,
a god.
okay.
I don't think it
Okay.
was the parasite god.
Okay. So I was just getting some stuff mixed up. Okay, cool.
But like, yeah, no, but I remember this moment from 4.1. I went and looked it up, and it's like, Ed in that was like, it's not a parasite god, it's a god parasite. And I thought that was funny because in this comic, Y calls it a parasite god. So he is clearly only half invested in whatever he's helping Ed with because he's not even getting the terminology right.
Yeah,
But
just doesn't give a shit about it.
Yeah, really, really emotionally invested in helping Edward. Clearly, but I think you're right. I think there's something to the fact that like Y, who is our first in line to succeeding Alexander, is the first job we're seeing him do is something that is about a god. Like it's similar to the origins of the BHI. I wouldn't be surprised if that's going so. Like my vibe of Y throughout this chapter is he's like Alexander, but not quite as shitty. So I'd be happy to see him succeed and take the throne.
Yeah. Fair enough. Interesting. I don't know. The possibilities. The question of who is going to be in charge of the BHI is such an interesting one. I kind of want to hear a bunch of out there theories. Like, well, spoilers, but we'll get to Alexander meets Clem in this chapter. Clem, great pick for charge of BHI. Got a pale predictor that's coming up with another great pick. Like, I think this is just a very fun question to think about. Who's actually going to be in charge of the BHI when this all ends up?
Yeah, I mean that's why it's our new category in the Pale Predictor.
I know.
Because
Yeah,
it is a very interesting question.
exactly. It's so good. Anywho, here's something. Alexander speaks about Nicolette and it uses the past tense, which Y calls out. I mean, he kind of, I guess, walks it back a little bit, but still worrying.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we'll see. Yeah, it's not even worth speculating on anything Nicolette related until we read the next chapter. I don't think.
Yeah, true.
I love the bit later on though. There's that part where we're talking about Bristow's seed that'll come up.
Yep, great.
And because
classic
Alexander,
part.
yeah, when Alexander's like, "Oh, don't worry, I didn't use Nicolette to get this," and it was just like the fact that you had to specify that though,
it's
like the fact
creepy.
that was an option that people would consider you might do.
Yeah,
Don't you need to reflect on that, Alexander?
yeah, majorly creepy.
Yeah, I guess before we get further into, well, actually, no, like, so there's also the argument they have with over Seth. This is where I came out of this chapter or bonus content with that idea that like, oh, why isn't the worst? Because he's actually seemingly a little bit upset about his cousin getting forsworn. And Alexander's response is, bold of you to assume that I cared about Seth, like, you idiot. You should have checked the cards or whatever. Like, he's like, he like scolds Y for assuming he cared about his own nephew. Like,
if I may play my role in this podcast, which is the defender of Alexander.
No, I expected as much. Yep.
The question that he raises is, if you cared so much, how come you did nothing to help him ever? And I think that's a very interesting question.
I mean, yes, but then also Y does make the argument that he assumed the head of the family who had taken responsibility for him might also try something. Yeah, I agree. Well, not saying Y could have done more. I'm just saying the fact that Alexander's argument is you should have known that I was going to do nothing is such a load of shit.
Yeah, that's fair. It's a good one.
But yeah. So I guess before we go further in this, I just want to also call out, like, I love the art in this comic. Like, it's really cool. It reminded me a bit, like, I obviously haven't read many comics, but we read like some Sandman back in pilot season.
Yes.
And it had very similar segments where it would just be like the Sandman kind of monologuing or explaining stuff about the world. And so it would just be like not speech text, but like text, and then you'd have all these images surrounding it in much the same vibe as this.
A much more naturalistic interplay of text and image, right? Rather than just having images and then text bubbles drawn on top.
Yeah, exactly. It was just like long explanations with like art sort of scattered amongst them.
Yeah.
And like, I thought it was really well done. This I'm trying to avoid just pulling out every good example because there's a bunch of them. But I mean, the way we sort of zoom in on Alexander's eye as he starts to pull it out is a harrowing way to introduce us to the comic.
Creepy. Love it.
I love the bit where they're arguing about Seth, and we just have like a little image of Seth, like a little photo, sort of stuck to the page. Like just a little reminder that Seth is a person.
Yeah, this is what Seth looked like.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I love the way the comic sort of starts to turn red as Alexander reaches his crescendo of turning Clem. Yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's good
just
stuff.
really impressed with the visuals of this extra material.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a fun one, isn't it? So yeah, Alexander is his plan here is to prepare a ritual that then will allow him to use Bristow's sight, see through Bristow's eyes, right? Which I assumed when I first read it meant that he would be seeing what Bristow's seeing, but it's explicitly using his capital S sight to see in the way that Bristow sees, which is fun. And yeah, this ritual involves some interesting components, to say the least.
Yeah, I love the blood, sweat, and tears
Yes.
like comment here. The
Yeah.
the way Alexander justifies needing seed and not sweat by like
Yeah.
just absolutely wrecking Bristow. Yeah,
Yeah,
craziest shit.
definitely. Oh, good times. So yeah, this kind of gives us maybe an explanation for why it seems like Alexander hasn't done much in this conflict, and it's an interesting thought. I kind of realized I should have seen it earlier, which is Alexander's not in any rush, right? Like he is confident that he is going to resolve this, this situation fairly strongly. He is confident that he is going to win this situation in the long term, and so he doesn't feel like he needs to be taking immediate quick reactions because he's a confident kind of guy, right?
Yeah, I can't believe you slash the people who just assumed Alexander had something up his sleeve might actually have been correct from the looks of it.
Mm.
It seems like actually he is going to come back in soon and just solve the problem.
Yep.
Or at least make a big dent against Bristow. I think what'll be interesting though, and like the whole thing here is like you're right. He doesn't seem to be in a rush. He has his plan and he can go and do it. There's just no consideration for all the people who are getting screwed and hurt in the meantime, though.
Yeah.
And I feel like that'll be the argument. Like if he does come back and just sort of take back the I was actually just about to say presidency, but I mean headmastership. um if he does come back and take it, then it's going to be like, surely the Kettitiers are going to go up and be like, well, what the fuck are you doing for all those of us who fucking bled for you while you were
Yeah.
off doing your shit?
He's
Like,
gonna pull the old, they're about to lose the war, and then Alexander rides over the hill to the east with the fucking Riders
yeah.
of Rohan or whatever.
And
Like,
then he's going to be like, you're welcome. And
yeah, I
hopefully the
saved the day,
Kettitiers are going to be like,
everybody. Yeah.
yeah, there'll be a bunch of people who'll be like, oh, thank God Alexander came and saved us.
Yeah.
And the Kettitiers are just going to stand up and be like, the fuck, man?
Yeah. What we were here the whole time. What are you doing? Like, yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
a bunch of people got hurt. Like, you're claiming to be the headmaster of this school, but you fucking did nothing to help us.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's also a very important moment here where Alexander, so he makes a pledge to the spirits that by the end of the summer, this will be over. Either Bristow's going to be dead or worse, or they can have him.
Yeah. But
And
so can we touch on his pledge for a bit? Because his pledge didn't seem to me like him saying, I will kill Bristow. He's saying this is going to be over because I think Bristow will die by the end of the summer. I see a doom in his future. Did you get that vibe,
yeah,
or am I?
no, I think you're right. You're right. He didn't promise that he would necessarily be the one to end Bristow. He's just like,
Yes.
obviously he's trying, but
Yeah.
he didn't commit to being the one to fell him himself.
Yeah, and I don't know. It just kind of gave me the vibe that Alexander sees some other demise in Bristow's future.
I mean, maybe what jumped out to me with this is he set a deadline for the end of the summer, and we
Mm,
obviously have another conflict that's
yes.
going to have a deadline of the end of the summer. What this made me realize is I had been sitting here kind of working off the assumption like, oh, okay, arc 7 or 8, we'll finish off the Blue Heron conflict, and then we'll go back to
Yeah.
Kennet and we'll
Yeah.
deal with the Carmine Beast. And like, I saw the other something here, and I was like, there's
What
no
if they're just the
reason that
same
these
thing? Yeah.
yeah, there's no reason these two conflicts have to stay separate, is there? This is just gonna like, I'm now convinced of exactly the opposite. I think the Carmine shit is gonna get fucking dragged right into all this school bullshit, and it's all gonna become one clusterfuck.
Yeah, I am expecting the same now. Like, I
I can't
just
believe
suspect.
this hadn't occurred to me until now. Like,
Yeah,
I just assumed they were separate and were going to stay that way until now. And I'm like, why have I been assuming that?
yeah. What exactly? They seem a lot more linked than we might have thought, and I'm excited to see that resolve in a very exciting way, which I expect it will.
Yeah, agreed.
Um, Yeah, so Alexander gets Bristow's sight and he's at the apartment block and starts talking to a lady named Janine, who is one of Bristow's residents before they interrupted by Clem.
My joy at seeing Clem again and having Sesh proved right like less than a week after she said that we'd see Clem again,
Yeah.
um, was only matched by my disappointment at the people in Clem's lives. Like Janine is like, "Oh, Alexander, are you single?" And I was like, "No, don't."
Like what? Yeah.
I mean,
Terrible.
yeah, like classic, old lady trying to help misunderstanding stuff. But I was just like, Clem, you really need better people in your life. Like
Yep.
the best person in your life is setting you up with Alexander. Like,
Yeah, that's
get
rough.
out of there. Um,
Clearly that's rough.
but yeah, so he gets Bristow's sight, and it's a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
Bristow's sight is as about as dehumanizing as you could possibly imagine.
Yep.
He literally fades out the person, and he just gets an info dump on how valuable they are. Traits that he might be able to use.
Yep.
Their score, how bound they are. It's fucking gross.
Yep. Their ranking of how much he cares about them.
Yep.
Yeah, it's very dehumanizing.
Well, and because like even like all of the text about them, like we get this huge amount of text from Miss Preston, which you can like zoom in on and read,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like it's all focused on like why she's special, like why she's aware, how aware she is, and then it's like what assets she has. Like she has these children, but they're not entitled to her inheritance. In fact, she's left her inheritance to Clem, is an implication, which I thought was very fun. Um, but it's like even when you strip the person and reduce them down to a couple of paragraphs, it's only paragraphs on like how they can be useful, what assets they can provide. Like it's just the worst.
Yep. We see one of the things that we see on Clem is how much money she has in her bank account, I think, which is 1 grand. Poor
Yeah,
Clem.
yeah. Like it's so gross. But like also on the other hand, like if we can look at Alexander's half of this for a bit,
Mm,
like if you had told me, oh, somebody in this story like has the ability to borrow somebody else's sight and see the world as they do,
mm.
I would like, oh, this would be a tool for empathy and understanding. And it's like,
You fool.
no, yeah. Alexander's like, I'm going to take, the ability to empathize with you and use it to shoot you in the ass. Like
Mm,
it's so, yeah, like fuck, I hate both of these guys, like Bristol and Alexander. Like Alexander takes this power and just uses it in the worst way you possibly could. Like in fact, you know what he does? He doesn't use it to see things from Bristow's perspective. He uses it to go down to Bristow's level. That's the problem I have with it.
yeah. Yeah. Interesting. It is. It's you, the reason he's doing this is so that he can leverage the information Bristow has to, in a way that Bristow would, but just against him. So you're right. He really is sinking to Bristow's level.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Um, but you can't hate him too much. There's a bit where where Alexander does this thing where he calls Clem Mrs. Robert John, which is her surname, and Clem's response is, "I don't believe I told you my name, did?" And Alexander responds, "She did not," cutting her off before Clem can ask, "Did uh, what was her
Did
name?
Miss
Did
Preston.
exactly Miss Preston tell you my name?" And Alexander's like, "No," and it's just such casual use of future predicting powers. I love it. It's the kind of casual power use that I love in a arrogant character like Alexander.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, you said it perfectly. It was like the problem is sometimes Alexander is just you love to hate him, and I hate how
Mm-hmm.
much I love to hate him.
Yeah.
Like Bristow and the Kenneteers talk about it. I think earlier in 7.3, where they're like, the problem with Bristow is he's very easy to hate, whereas like Alexander tricks you into thinking he's not that bad,
Mm.
and this is a perfect example of that. But yeah, so we find out Clem is ranked number 4, out of Bristow's collection, which is like terrible, but also I was like, yeah, go Clem.
Mm.
I can't help but feel that a huge part of that ranking is not just that Clem's a gilded lily, but like because she's so awesome. Like she's everybody loves Clem, like in and out of text. everybody thinks Clem's the best. And I wonder if like that's where her value comes from, like how much she mellows out and stabilizes other people in the apartment building.
Mm, yeah, I think so. I think that's her value, right? Um, she, you're right. It's surprisingly high, um, and so it's like her gilded lily stuff is cool, sure, but it's not enough to make her that important to Bristow, right?
Hmm. Yeah, no, I think her real power comes from like being a bit of a glue that holds this place together. Like every time we see her, she's interacting with everyone. Yeah, everyone loves her. Even Sharon loves her. Like her powers of making people like her are her real power. And it's like you could see this place getting a lot less stable with Clem out of the picture.
Mm.
And here comes Alexander with a few apprentice slots ready and
Ready and
available.
waiting. Yep.
I seriously hope that's not where he's going with it, but like that would also be very fun.
I mean, it could be. I could see it.
Well, we just had Clem. She got that kind of victory where she'd said no to the world of the practice,
Mm.
and her actually saying yes to it and being in Camp Alexander would be as tragic as it is kind of hilarious.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah, it would. Ah, good times. Um, and that's the end of all the chapters that we are discussing today.
Yeah, I mean, God, I can't wait for 7.4. Like Nicolette's there, obviously Alexander's. I can't wait.
Yeah.
This is really heating up. I can't. It's so good.
Yep. Yep. It's good stuff. We will have to see what happens with the Nicolette conversation, with Clem, with all this stuff. Next time. But before we finish up, let's dive into uh, Pale Predictor. So obviously people can leave predictions in our Pale Predictor sheet, and we pull out the predictions that we want to discuss each week. And of course,
Yeah.
we've pulled out predictions this week. Elliot, what's your prediction?
Yeah, well, it looks like we've both pulled out predictions that relate to our new category of
Mm-hmm.
who is going to end up in charge of the BHI, I think is how
Yes.
it was phrased.
Yes.
Um so I've put out a prediction from Meiji Hao. Sorry, I probably pronounced that wrong. Um but basically they've sort of said I think the Kenneteers and their allies will end up with an advantage over both sides, and they're going to call in the judges to appoint the new headmaster.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the judges are supposed to have been given the ability to govern the affairs of practitioners in the region. I think that's something Miss said.
Mm-hmm.
And this situation is going to end up very messy. And what the Blue Heron Institute needs is what all schools have in real life: a third party to monitor its affairs and appoint the leadership. I think calling the judges in for something like this would also reinforce the role the Kennedy is awakened with as agents of justice and a bridge between the practitioners and the others. Also, Nina the librarian would be a great candidate for headmistress. Um,
I would love to see Nina, but yeah.
yeah, no, I really like this. As we've just talked about how these two conflicts might start to merge together, and the judges have come up specifically these two. Like, I love this as a way to bring our conflicts together, bring those themes of like others and who has jurisdiction over who that we've talked about in the story, like coming together. I really like this idea. I think there's really something to this.
Mm. Yeah, I like it too. But yeah, no, I like it. I like it. It speaks to the idea that we've kind of raised a bit more in discussion of this chapter, which is the BHI and Carmine replacement and murder stuff is obviously not necessarily as distinct and separate as we might have thought it was once upon a time. Possibly the answer to the two things is the same, right? Or very, very much intertwined. That's why I like
Yeah,
this one.
because when we first got to the Blue Heron Institute, we talked a lot about how it compared to the Kennet other alliance, and I think there's still a lot of stuff where we get to compare these two attempts to unite people that are usually in conflict.
Mm,
But there's also that whole thing that has sort of been a bit of an undercurrent that Miss has brought up every now and then, which is like you are meant to have these judges over the practitioners, and that's not really happening anymore. And maybe that's her plan for the Kenneteers, is they're maybe meant to try and nudge things back in that direction.
mm.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if this prediction is going to be like bang on, but I think there's something to the idea of bringing the judges in to help like organize things after this conflict.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, I'll talk about my prediction as well because we're kind of
Yep.
talking about the type of thing here. My prediction was from I Measly Impressed, and they basically think Miss will end up becoming the headmistress or deputy headmistress of the BHI. And I think I really love this. I think, yes, it probably breaks a few rules of how Miss functions, explicitly giving her a label. And possibly the world isn't necessarily ready for accepting another in a position of power like this. But just personality-wise, she would be the ideal candidate, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I do think possibly that's where the story is going. It is talking about having an other in a position of power explicitly over practitioners in a uplifting way, like the school. I think that's a very interesting idea, and it's one that I think is I hope the story will explore, I guess.
Yeah, well, because there was a bit of an idea in the original Seal of Solomon of like segregation, right? Like this is the domain of human, this is the domain of other.
Yes.
And maybe that's part of the problem, is that they're seen as so distinct from each other.
Yeah, they can't help but be at conflict because they are, set up as in opposition, or at least in distinction to each other.
Yeah, yeah. And so like part of the step of bridging the gap between them is to literally like, have them like hang out together, and having someone in a position of power in the school like totally makes sense. I think as well there was that line Verona had about how she wants someone who doesn't want the role in a position of power, and who doesn't want the role more than Miss. So I could see something like this happening, or like I love the concept behind it of bridging those gaps between others and practitioners.
Yeah. Cool. So again, if you want to leave your predictions in our Pale Predictor sheet, the link to do so can be found in the show notes down below.
Yes, you can also find in the links to the show notes down below a link to doofmedia.com. That's where all the other Doof shows can be found. There's the High Ground we already talked about. That's coming out next week.
Yep.
Matt and Scott just released their latest episode of Other Levels of the Tower, where they talk about other Stephen King things.
Yes, we should touch on, these are patron bonus shows. So make sure you're a patron at the $5 a month or up level, $10 a month or up level, to get access to these bonus shows.
Yeah. I've forgotten the name of Matt and Scott's latest episode because it was a work I hadn't heard of, so I apologize to them. But
yeah, it wasn't Needful Things, was it? That was the previous one, or was it Needful Things?
I think it was neat. That sounds familiar.
Okay, yeah, it was. Yeah. Anyway, go check that out.
Worst plug ever.
Yep. You can find all the information on the Patreon, patreon.com/Dovania. While you're looking in our show notes, of course, make sure you also check out the link to our discussion thread, where you can leave your answers to our discussion question. We've got a discussion question this week, which is,
yes,
was Alexander justified in forswearing Seth? Let's officialize these responses. Let's hash it out. Let's debate it out. Leave your answers, and we'll definitively answer the question next time.
Yes, I kind of regret not making this our discussion question last week, but I think it's still relevant, and in fact, there's maybe even more information for people to debate with. So tell us why he wasn't, or play the devil's advocate, and take a position you don't really believe in, surely, and say why he was.
Yeah. Leave your answers to that in our discussion thread, or just your thoughts on these chapters or the show in general, of course. And while you're out and about, make sure you drop by patreon.com/Wildbow and give Wildbow some support, because of course this is his story and he only writes it because he's able to be supported by his loving audience members. So become one of those audience members.
We got a whole extra comic issue this week.
I know.
Throw the man some money for it.
Yeah. And with that, we'll see you next time.